The border moon of Kereth had no true night. Even after the system's pale star slipped behind the gas giant, lightning continued to crawl through the clouds, illuminating the shattered battlefield in brief flashes of silver. Lieutenant Daniel Mercer moved between the blackened remains of defense drones, his rifle pressed against his chest, and his helmet display flickering with warnings. His squad's signals had vanished 12 minutes earlier. On Kereth, 12 minutes was enough time for the weather to strip a vehicle to metal bones, or for a Varithi patrol to turn a lost soldier into a diplomatic incident. "Command, this is Mercer," he whispered. "I am alone, mildly injured, and beginning to suspect this assignment was poorly advertised." Only Static answered. They promised scenic views. A deep metallic sound echoed behind him. Daniel turned and fired. The plasma bolt struck an energy shield, spreading across its surface like blue fire over glass. Behind it stood a tall woman in dark, segmented armor. She looked almost human, except for the elegant long ears rising through her pale blonde hair and the faint silver patterns moving beneath the skin around her temples. Her golden eyes regarded him with infuriating calm. She carried a curved blade that seemed to bend the rain away from its edge. Daniel lowered his rifle slightly. "You could have coughed." The alien warrior tilted her head. His helmet translated her response a second later. "Why? So I would know you were there? That would reduce my advantage." "Yes, that is generally the purpose of coughing." She stepped forward. Daniel fired again, but she moved before the weapon discharged. Her shield caught the shot while her blade sliced through the rifle's barrel with a shower of sparks. Daniel threw the ruined weapon aside and rolled beneath her next strike. He came up behind a broken drone, pulled its emergency power cell free, and hurled it toward her boots. The warrior glanced down. Daniel shot the cell with his sidearm. The explosion threw both of them across the mud. His ears rang. His helmet display died. For several seconds he could only hear the rain striking his armor and his own painfully loud breathing. When he looked up, the alien woman was already rising. One side of her armor smoked, but she appeared more offended than injured. Daniel pushed himself to his feet. "In my defense, that usually works better." She charged. The duel carried them through the ruins of the outpost. Her strength was terrifying, but she fought with disciplined precision, never wasting movement. Daniel survived by being unpredictable. He kicked debris into her path, used damaged gravity plates to alter his jumps, and once threw his empty sidearm at her face. She caught it. "That was not a weapon," she said. "It distracted you." "For less than a second. I'm working with limited resources." At last, Daniel lured her onto a collapsed cargo platform. When she raised her blade, he struck the manual release. The platform tilted sharply and the warrior lost her footing. Daniel caught her sword arm twisted and forced the humming blade into the mud beside her throat. For a moment, neither moved. Rain ran down her face. Her golden eyes studied him with something that looked less like anger and more like surprise. Daniel breathed heavily. "I believe this is the part where you surrender." A faint smile touched her lips. "That is not how this ends, human." A burst of violet light struck his chest. Daniel's muscles locked. He fell beside her, unable to move, while she calmly removed a small stun device from beneath her armor. His final thought before darkness took him was that hidden weapons were deeply unsporting. He awoke inside a circular chamber of polished black stone. Warm light floated in the air without any visible source, and translucent symbols moved across the walls like schools of luminous fish. Daniel was seated upright, his wrists secured by thin silver chains connected to the floor. They looked ceremonial, but when he pulled against them, they tightened. The alien warrior stood before him without her helmet. Her long blonde hair fell over one shoulder, and her long ears gave her otherwise human face an unmistakably otherworldly grace. Daniel looked around. "Prison? My family fortress." "That sounds worse." Several armored Varithi watched from the edges of the chamber. None appeared hostile. In fact, two of them seemed to be struggling not to laugh. The warrior approached and touched a control on the chain. It glowed softly. "My name is Vaelara Then," she said, "commander of the 9th Spear. Daniel Mercer, commander of 1 damaged rifle. I know who you are." "That is unsettling." Vaelara ignored the remark. "You fought with courage. You used intelligence rather than strength. You defeated me fairly. And then you stunned me unfairly." The duel had ended. "That feels like a technicality." She knelt so they were eye level. "Under the oldest law of my people, when a warrior is defeated by an honorable opponent, the victor earns the right to offer a bond of union." Daniel stared at her. His translator repeated the sentence, apparently convinced it had made perfect sense. "I think your machine translated something incorrectly." It did not. Vaelara lifted the silver chain between them. Around the chamber, the watching warriors bowed their heads. She spoke with the solemn certainty of someone announcing an ancient and sacred truth. "You belong to me now, Daniel Mercer." Daniel blinked. Vaelara's golden eyes narrowed slightly as though waiting for him to understand. "You are my husband." Silence filled the chamber. Daniel looked at the chains, then at the gathered alien soldiers, then back at the fierce woman kneeling before him. "Command," he muttered to his dead communicator. "I have located the enemy's most dangerous weapon." Vaelara frowned. "What weapon?" "Marriage." Daniel spent the next hour attempting to explain that humans did not usually accept marriage proposals while chained to floors. Vaelara listened with the patience of a commander, reviewing a badly written maintenance report, her long ears tilting whenever his translator struggled with words such as consent, engagement, and catastrophic misunderstanding. The other warriors had left the chamber, though Daniel suspected several were listening beyond the door. Every few minutes, he heard muffled laughter from the corridor. "The chains are symbolic," Vaelara said. "They are attached to the floor." Symbolically. Daniel pulled against them. The silver links brightened and gently dragged his wrists back to his knees. "That symbol has excellent engineering." Vaelara touched the control at her belt. The chains dissolved into threads of light and vanished beneath his skin without leaving a mark. Daniel immediately stood, took 2 steps toward the door, and collided with an invisible barrier. A soft pulse pushed him backward. He stared at her. "The doorway is also symbolic." "That is security." "Good. I was worried your customs were becoming unreasonable." Vaelara led him through the fortress after providing him with a dark Varethi tunic and removing most of his damaged armor. The building had been carved into the mountain centuries ago, but nothing inside felt ancient. Veins of living crystal ran through the walls, carrying energy and information like glowing blood vessels. Small insect-shaped machines repaired battle damage. Doors opened before Vaelara without being touched, their surfaces flowing apart like liquid metal. Daniel tried memorizing the route, but the corridors subtly changed behind them. "The fortress moves," he said. "It adapts." "To what?" "Threats." Daniel glanced back at the corridor that had just sealed itself. "I'm flattered." They entered a chamber overlooking a vast crater filled with suspended platforms and slowly rotating ships. Varethi vessels resembled armored creatures asleep in the air, their hulls flexing as if breathing. Beyond them, Kareth's gas giant covered half the sky, its storms turning in enormous bands of copper and white. Vaelara gestured toward a table where food had been arranged. Most of it looked harmless. One dish appeared to be watching him. Daniel pointed at it. "Is that alive?" "Only slightly." "That is not a reassuring measurement." Vaelara sat opposite him. Without armor, she seemed less imposing, though the strength in her posture never disappeared. Her pale face was almost entirely human, but her long ears moved with subtle emotion, and faint silver markings shimmered near her temples whenever the fortress communicated with her implants. "You will remain here until the border situation is resolved," she said. "As a prisoner?" "As my intended. That is a prisoner with better furniture. You have freedom within the inner fortress. And the invisible walls? They prevent accidents." Such as leaving? Exactly. Daniel tasted a piece of blue fruit. It cracked like glass between his teeth, then became warm and sweet on his tongue. He looked at it suspiciously. Your food cannot decide what state of matter it prefers. It was engineered for soldiers. That explains nothing. For the first time, Vaelara smiled openly. It changed her face more than Daniel expected, softening the severity of her golden eyes. The expression vanished quickly, as though she had not meant to reveal it. He leaned back. You truly believe we are supposed to marry because of one duel? Not because of the duel, because of what happened within it. You tried to cut my rifle in half. I succeeded. Yes, thank you for preserving the distinction. Vaelara folded her hands. You had 3 opportunities to kill me. You chose restraint each time. When I fell, you held the blade at my throat and demanded surrender rather than blood. Among my people, such conduct is not weakness. It is proof that power has not mastered the person who carries it. Daniel's humor faded. And if I refuse? Her ears lowered slightly. Then you refuse. No execution, no dishonor trial, no volcano. We do not use volcanoes for legal matters. That is comforting. The bond cannot exist without acceptance, she continued. The chains declare my claim before my family. They do not compel your answer. Daniel studied her, realizing the confidence she displayed in the chamber had concealed something closer to uncertainty. Vaelara could charge into plasma fire without hesitation, but she seemed almost uncomfortable waiting for a simple human response. Before he could speak, a mechanical creature entered through the wall. It was round, silver, and supported by 6 delicate legs. It climbed onto the table and projected a holographic human skeleton. Daniel stared. Why is there a medical drone showing my bones? Vaelara's expression became carefully neutral. The drone scanned him, then displayed percentages beside his organs. What did you tell it? He asked. You said humans sometimes sleep like rocks. Daniel closed his eyes. I instructed the medical system to determine whether mineralization occurs during unconsciousness. It is an expression. I know that now. You ordered a geological examination of me. The scan found no immediate danger. That sentence somehow makes this worse. The drone extended a tiny drill. Daniel jumped from his chair. Absolutely not. Vaelara caught the machine in one hand and deactivated it. A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Daniel pointed at her. You knew that drill was coming. I suspected. You let it approach me. I wish to observe whether humans defend themselves from medical equipment more effectively than armed warriors. And? Her smile returned. The medical equipment came closer. Later, Daniel was shown to a private room overlooking the crater. There were no bars, but when he touched the balcony threshold, a field shimmered across the opening. On the table rested his damaged communicator, carefully repaired but unable to reach Earth frequencies. Vaelara remained at the door. You are not required to decide tonight, she said. That is generous. On Earth, we usually allow at least 2 meals before lifelong commitment. I will provide 3. She turned to leave. Vaelara. She looked back. Daniel lifted the communicator. Did you repair this? I ordered it repaired. Why? Because a warrior should not be stripped of every connection to his former life. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Daniel glanced toward the adaptive walls, the living starships, and the impossible sky beyond the mountain. Former life sounds alarmingly permanent. Vaelara's ears rose with faint amusement. You defeated me, Daniel Mercer. You should have considered the consequences. The door flowed shut behind her, leaving Daniel alone with a fortress that rearranged itself, a medical drone that believed he might become stone, and an alien warrior who had captured him only to give him the right to walk away. He sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed and looked at the silver bracelet now resting around his wrist. Scenic views, he murmured. They definitely mentioned scenic views. By the third morning, Daniel had discovered that the fortress disliked him. It began with doors. They opened for Vaelara, servants, engineers, and even the six-legged medical drone that had tried to drill him. For Daniel, they waited just long enough to make him stop, reconsider his dignity, and step forward again before opening suddenly. "The building is mocking me," he said. Vaelara continued walking beside him. "The fortress does not possess humor." A door closed on the edge of Daniel's sleeve. He pulled the fabric free. "Then it has developed cruelty first." They were crossing the eastern engineering level, where gravity generators hung in transparent shafts beneath their feet. Far below, rings of dark matter rotated around artificial singularities no larger than coins, bending light into thin golden circles. Varithi engineers moved between control columns, their long ears decorated with metallic rank bands. They watched Daniel openly. His presence had become the fortress's favorite scandal. News of Vaelara's claim had spread beyond Kareth. Noble families had begun sending formal objections, legal challenges, and one poem describing humanity as short-eared chaos wrapped in cloth. Daniel had liked that one. At the center of the chamber, an elderly engineer named Corveth waited beside a trembling reactor console. His ears drooped with exhaustion. "The lower gravity core has failed 7 times, Vaelara said. "If it collapses again, half the fortress will lose stabilization." Daniel looked through the floor at the singularity spinning beneath them. "What happens to the other half?" "It falls upward." "I appreciate precise engineering terminology." Corveth activated a hologram. Thousands of equations unfolded around them, showing energy surges moving through the core in complex waves. Daniel understood perhaps one symbol in 20, but the pattern felt familiar. "Your cooling system is cycling too quickly," he said. Corveth stared at him. "That is impossible. Humans say that just before discovering something obvious." Several engineers muttered. Daniel crouched beside the console and removed a panel. Behind it, crystal conduits pulsed with blue-white light. He found a small mechanical valve vibrating against its housing. "What does this control?" "The auxiliary thermal exchange." "It's loose." Corveth looked offended. "Varithi construction does not become loose." Daniel touched the valve. It fell off. Silence spread across the chamber. He held it up. "Your construction appears to be exploring new traditions." Vaelara turned away, but he saw her shoulders move with suppressed laughter. Daniel borrowed a tool, tightened the housing, replaced the valve, and struck the side of the panel with his palm. The reactor's trembling stopped. The golden rings beneath the floor stabilized into perfect circles. Every engineer stared at him. Corveth checked the readings twice. "You repaired a quantum gravity core by hitting it." "I tightened the valve first." "The strike was unnecessary?" "Spiritually, no." A younger engineer whispered, "Human mechanical sorcery." Daniel pointed at him. "Exactly. Very dangerous. Requires years of training and a complete disregard for warranties." Vaelara finally laughed, a clear sound that made several nearby warriors glance at her in surprise. Daniel suspected they had rarely heard it. Their amusement ended when 3 noble envoys entered the chamber. They wore ceremonial armor formed from mirrored scales, each plate displaying shifting family symbols. The leader, Lord Sarath, looked at Daniel as though someone had placed mud on a sacred table. "Commander Vaelara," he said, "the High Houses demand the immediate rejection of this unlawful bond." Vaelara's expression hardened. "The bond is lawful." "With a human?" "With an honorable opponent." Sarath stepped closer. "He is a border soldier from a primitive species." Daniel raised a hand. "Primitive is fair, but we have recently mastered automatic doors." No one laughed except Corveth. Sarath's gaze sharpened. "You mock our court." "I haven't seen your court yet. I'm pacing myself." Vaelara moved between them. Daniel Mercer defeated me under witnessed combat. The old law stands. The old law was written before humans crawled from their oceans. So were many foolish laws, Daniel said. Age is not always a recommendation. Sarath ignored him. If you continue, the houses will challenge your command. Your fleets may be divided. Your family name may be stripped from the military record. For the first time, Daniel saw the weight hidden beneath Vaelara's certainty. Her entire life rested inside those threats. Rank, loyalty, ancestry, the respect of warriors she had led through war. Still, she did not lower her eyes. Then let them challenge me. Sarath's ears drew back. For him? Vaelara glanced at Daniel. For my honor. The nobles departed without another word, their mirrored armor reflecting the cold light of the reactor. Daniel waited until they were gone. You realize you could simply tell everyone I escaped. You would not escape. That confidence is becoming irritating. The fortress has already learned your walking pattern. A nearby door closed before Daniel reached it. He pointed. See? Hostile. Vaelara's smile faded as she watched the envoys disappear. They will not stop with words. Daniel leaned against the repaired console. Political pressure, public humiliation, possible assassination? Yes. Good. I was worried marriage would become relaxing. She studied him. You could still leave when communications are restored. And allow Lord Mirror Armor to win? This is not your conflict. Daniel looked through the transparent floor at the restored gravity core, then at the engineers still whispering about human sorcery. It became my conflict when your people wrote poetry about my ears. Vaelara's long ears lifted. That offended you? Deeply. My ears are excellent. This time even Corveth laughed. Above them, warning lights suddenly turned red. A low alarm rolled through the fortress and the living walls pulsed like a frightened heartbeat. Vaelara's hand moved to her weapon. A holographic message appeared over the reactor chamber. An unidentified warship had entered Kareth's atmosphere. Daniel watched its dark shape descend through the storm clouds. Friend of yours? He asked. Vaelara's golden eyes narrowed. No. The fortress doors opened for Daniel immediately. He looked at them. Now it respects me. No, Vaelara said, drawing her blade. Now it is afraid. The unidentified warship did not attack. It descended through Kareth's storms with its weapons sealed, broadcasting a diplomatic code so old that even the fortress needed several seconds to recognize it. Vaelara watched the vessel settle above the landing crater while armored platforms rose to meet it. That is not a warship, Daniel said. It carries enough weapons to erase this mountain. On Earth, that still qualifies. It is a royal courier. That is a courier? Our letters are sometimes unpopular. The ship's hull unfolded like black petals, revealing a central chamber filled with pale light. 3 figures emerged in silver robes, accompanied by floating machines shaped like narrow masks. The tallest envoy introduced herself as Magistrate Othara, representative of the Imperial Council. She looked at Daniel's bracelet, then at Vaelara. The Council has reached a decision, she announced. The human and Commander Then will travel to the capital worlds. Their bond must be examined before witnesses from the Allied systems. Daniel glanced at Vaelara. That sounds less like diplomacy and more like being displayed in a museum. Othara's mask drone turned toward him. The human speaks frequently. You noticed quickly. Vaelara accepted the order without argument, though Daniel saw tension gather along her jaw. Within 2 hours, they were aboard the courier, leaving Kareth behind. The vessel was alive. Its corridors pulsed softly beneath Daniel's boots, and translucent membranes opened ahead of them like eyelids. The air carried a warm, metallic scent. When he placed his hand against the wall, something moved beneath the surface and pressed back. Daniel withdrew his hand. The ship touched me. It is learning your biology, Vaelara said. Without buying me dinner? The ship does not eat dinner. Then our relationship has no future. Their assigned chamber contained 2 sleeping platforms grown from the floor and a wide observation window overlooking the stars. Vaelara immediately chose the platform nearest the door. Daniel sat on the other. Are we expected to share this room? The council wishes to observe whether we can coexist. We survived a duel, political threats, and a geological medical examination. I think we've established compatibility. Vaelara removed her armor piece by piece. Beneath it, she wore a dark-fitted uniform marked with the silver crest of her house. Without the weight of command around her, she appeared younger, though no less guarded. The ship entered a fold corridor before Daniel could ask where they were going. Stars stretched into bright threads, then vanished. Outside the window, enormous shapes drifted through a violet emptiness, creatures with transparent bodies and luminous skeletons swimming between dimensions. Daniel approached the glass. What are those? Varen travelers. They migrate through folded space. One of them is larger than Kareth. It is a juvenile. Daniel stepped back. Naturally. The largest creature turned one vast eye toward the ship. The living vessel trembled, and a low musical vibration passed through the floor. Vaelara placed her palm against the wall. It is frightened. The ship? Yes. Daniel touched the surface beside her. Tell it we're frightened too. Shared panic builds trust. The vibration softened. Over the following days, the courier crossed worlds Daniel had only seen in classified reports. They passed a planet wrapped in artificial rings that harvested lightning, a city suspended inside the atmosphere of a blue giant, and a moon whose oceans floated several kilometers above its surface because of ancient gravity engines. At every stop, officials questioned them. How had the duel begun? Why had Daniel spared Vaelara? Did he understand the meaning of the bond? Did Vaelara consider humans equals? Daniel usually answered honestly. Vaelara answered carefully. During one hearing, a priest asked Daniel what quality he admired most in his intended. He considered the question. Her patience. Vaelara's ears lifted slightly. Because she has not killed me despite several opportunities. Her ears lowered again. That evening they ate in the ship's central garden, where silver trees drew nutrients from the vessel's blood. Daniel noticed Vaelara had barely touched her food. You dislike diplomatic travel? I dislike being examined. You are a famous commander. Surely people examine you often. They examine my victories, not me. Her answer quieted him. After a moment, she continued. Among my people, strength attracts loyalty but not closeness. Those beneath me fear disappointing me. Those above me fear what I might become. And potential husbands? They fear losing. Daniel smiled faintly. I lost. You forced me to use a hidden weapon. So you cheated. I adapted. That is cheating with confidence. Vaelara's laughter was brief, but this time she did not hide it. She told him of her childhood in the fortress, of training before sunrise, of winning her first command at an age when most Varethi still studied philosophy. Daniel spoke of Earth, of crowded cities, terrible military coffee, and his younger sister who had once replaced his shampoo with industrial adhesive. Did she survive? Vaelara asked. Yes. You were merciful. My mother intervened. The humor faded as Daniel admitted he had spent years avoiding attachments because soldiers who cared too deeply could be broken too easily. Vaelara looked toward the silver branches overhead. My people teach the opposite. A warrior without attachments has nothing to defend. Before Daniel could respond, the ship convulsed. The garden tilted violently. Trees folded into the walls while warning tones screamed through the chamber. Beyond the observation window, the fold corridor fractured into jagged streams of light. A dark object appeared ahead, an ancient station built around the skeleton of a dead star. The courier's voice entered their minds as a frightened whisper. Something inside the station had seized control of the ship. Vaelara's armor raced toward her in separate pieces, assembling across her body. Daniel grabbed the nearest emergency weapon. It unfolded into a blade twice the length of his arm. He stared at it. "Do you have anything designed for people with reasonable ambitions?" The floor split open beneath them. Vaelara caught his wrist as gravity disappeared. Together they fell toward the glowing heart of the living ship, while the dead station outside slowly opened its eyes. Daniel and Vaelara fell through the ship's inner passage as gravity reversed around them. Membranes opened and closed like frightened mouths, while cables of living tissue snapped from the walls and twisted in the air. Vaelara held Daniel's wrist with one hand and drove her blade into the floor with the other. The weapon cut a glowing line through the organic surface before catching against a structural rib. They stopped so suddenly that Daniel nearly lost his shoulder. "I would like to register a complaint," he said, hanging above the pulsing depths. "With whom?" "The ship. It is currently being invaded. That does not excuse poor passenger service." Vaelara swung him toward a maintenance tunnel. Daniel caught the edge, pulled himself inside, then helped her climb after him. The tunnel contracted around them, reacting to the intrusion controlling the vessel. Somewhere beyond the walls, the courier's nervous song had become a low, painful hum. A mask-shaped security drone floated into view. Its silver surface split open. Daniel ducked as a plasma beam scorched the wall above him. Vaelara moved before the drone could fire again. Her blade passed through its center, and the machine fell in two neat pieces. Daniel looked at the smoking halves. "I was going to reason with it. You were lying on the floor. It is a respected human negotiation position." More drones appeared at the far end of the tunnel. They ran. The ship's corridors rearranged themselves as they passed, trying to help despite the foreign intelligence spreading through its neural systems. Doors opened a moment too late. Gravity shifted sideways. Once, Daniel and Vaelara sprinted along a wall while 3 drones fired beneath their feet. They reached the command chamber to find Magistrate Othara trapped inside a web of luminous restraints. The other envoys lay unconscious beside the central interface. Black symbols crawled over every surface. "The station has connected itself to the courier," Othara said. "It is searching our archives." "For what?" Vaelara asked. Othara's expression hardened. "The border defense network." Daniel stared through the forward window. The ancient structure around the dead star was no longer dark. Rings of metal rotated around its core, drawing pale energy from the stellar corpse. Thousands of weapon ports opened across its surface. "That seems excessive for a research station." "It was built before the current empires," Othara said. "Its original purpose was erased." The ship shuddered again. A voice filled the chamber. "Conflict patterns confirmed. Biological civilizations remain unstable. Corrective extinction authorized." Daniel sighed. Ancient machines always become dramatic after a few thousand years alone. Vaelara cut Othara free while Daniel approached the interface. The station had fused with the courier's navigation system through a column of black light. Data moved through it too quickly for any organic mind to follow. "Can you sever the connection?" Vaelara asked. "Probably." "You do not sound certain." "I'm trying to appear humble." He removed a damaged access plate and studied the crystalline pathways beneath it. The station anticipated conventional attacks, blocking every military command before Othara could send it. Daniel instead opened the ship's environmental controls. Vaelara glanced over his shoulder. "Why are you adjusting the dining systems?" "Because no weaponized intelligence expects to be defeated by lunch." Daniel ordered every food synthesizer aboard the courier to generate conflicting molecular recipes at once. Thousands of nutritional instructions flooded the living ship's network. Human coffee, Varithi battle rations, fermented sea fungus, and something labeled ceremonial digestive paste. The station paused. "What have you done?" Othara whispered. "Given it indigestion." The black symbols flickered as the ancient intelligence attempted to classify the useless information. For several seconds, the weapon system lost control of the corridor defenses. Vaelara smiled. "How long?" "Perhaps 30 seconds. More than enough." She ran toward the docking passage. Daniel followed her into the boarding tube connecting the courier to the station. The tunnel shook as ancient machines tried to seal it. At the far end, armored constructs rose from the floor, their bodies made of dark metal and fossilized bone. Vaelara met them head-on. Her blade became a ribbon of golden light. She moved with brutal precision, cutting through joints and energy cores while Daniel used a captured pulse weapon to disable anything approaching from behind. They fought without speaking, each anticipating the other's movement. When Daniel stumbled, Vaelara covered him. When a construct struck her blind side, Daniel shot it before its weapon could fire. They reached the station's control vault as the corridor collapsed behind them. Inside stood a sphere of frozen light surrounded by rotating rings. Holographic maps showed fleets, colonies, and populated worlds marked for destruction. A beam struck Vaelara from the darkness. She threw Daniel aside and took the blast across her armor. The impact hurled her against the wall. Smoke rose from her chest plate as she fell. Daniel's humor vanished. He fired until the hidden weapon broke apart, then dropped beside her. Her eyes opened, unfocused but alive. "You protected me," he said. "You are slower." I was having an excellent day until that sentence. The station's voice returned. Emotional attachment detected. Tactical weakness confirmed. Daniel looked at Vaelara, then at the sphere controlling the station. "No," he said quietly. "That is where you keep making mistakes." He carried her to the central platform while the ancient intelligence activated its final defenses. Vaelara forced herself upright and placed her hand over his on the control ring. Human and Varethi biosignatures entered the system together. The station hesitated. Its extinction protocol had been built upon the assumption that former enemies could never willingly trust one another. Daniel smiled as warnings multiplied across the sphere. "Your machine hates paradoxes." Vaelara tightened her grip on his hand. "Then let us give it one." Together, they overloaded the core. The frozen light cracked, and a wave of silent energy swept through the station. Weapons shut down across the dead star. The ancient intelligence uttered one final confused sentence before fading. "Hostile species cooperation impossible." Daniel helped Vaelara stand as the vault began to collapse. "We should leave before it changes its mind." She leaned against him, weak but smiling. "You finally offered a sensible plan. I am injured by your surprise." They escaped aboard the living courier moments before the station folded inward and vanished into the dead star. As the ship carried them away, Daniel remained beside Vaelara in the medical chamber, refusing to release her hand even after the danger had passed. For once, neither of them made a joke about it. Vaelara recovered slowly, which she considered an insult to both her body and her reputation. By the second day aboard the living courier, she had already attempted to leave the medical chamber 3 times. Each attempt ended with the ship sealing the doorway and lowering the gravity around her bed until she could no longer stand without floating. Daniel found this deeply satisfying. "The vessel has excellent judgment," he said, placing a tray of food beside her. Vaelara glared at the wall. "It has become disobedient. It learned from me." The wall produced a pleased vibration beneath Daniel's hand, and Vaelara's long ears drew back. "Do not encourage it." Her damaged armor rested within a regeneration cradle nearby, its black plates slowly knitting themselves together beneath streams of microscopic machines. The blast had fractured 2 ribs and burned through the protective implants along her spine, but the physicians promised she would fully recover. Daniel had remained beside her longer than necessary, pretending to study the station data while checking her breathing whenever she slept. He assumed she had not noticed. Vaelara noticed everything. On the 3rd day, Magistrate Othara summoned them to the command chamber. The evidence recovered from the ancient station had revealed more than a forgotten extinction protocol. Buried within its oldest archives was a historical record dating back nearly 9,000 years, long before the Varethi Dominion, or Earth's first orbital colonies. Holographic figures appeared above the chamber floor, 2 armored species standing across a devastated world, their fleets burning in the sky. "The station documented the Origin War," Othara said. "The conflict that gave birth to Vaelara's marriage custom." Daniel folded his arms. I was hoping it began with alcohol and a poor decision. Vaelara stood beside him in a simple silver uniform, still pale from her injuries. The surviving records say 2 enemy commanders ended the war by forming a bond. They married each other, after attempting to kill each other for 11 years. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. A traditional courtship. Othara enlarged the archive. The 2 ancient warriors had discovered that their governments intended to destroy both populations rather than accept defeat. By combining their command codes, they had disabled the weapons and united their soldiers against the rulers prolonging the war. The ceremonial chains had not represented ownership. They had symbolized the hatred, loyalty, and obligations binding enemies to endless conflict. When removed, they declared that both warriors had chosen a new allegiance freely. Daniel looked at the silver bracelet around his wrist. So, somewhere along the way, everyone remembered the chains and forgot the freedom. Traditions often preserve the visible part, Othara said. Meaning is easier to lose. Vaelara remained silent. Later, she asked Daniel to accompany her to the courier's observation garden. The silver trees had regrown after the attack, and transparent flowers opened whenever distant stars passed across the ceiling. Fold space creatures drifted outside, their luminous skeletons moving through darkness like constellations learning to swim. Vaelara stopped beneath the largest tree. In her hands rested the ceremonial chain from Kareth. When I placed this on you, I believed I was honoring the law, she said. You were. I was also hiding behind it. Daniel's expression softened. Vaelara drew a breath. The law gave me permission to claim what I was too proud to ask for. It allowed me to speak with certainty when I felt none. You felt uncertain? You threw an explosive power cell at me, broke my gravity platform, and held my own blade at my throat. That usually inspires confidence. You were irritating even then. I prefer consistent. A faint smile appeared, but it did not remain. Vaelara opened the chain. Its silver links separated into streams of light and circled Daniel's wrist before fading. The bracelet dissolved with them. For the first time since Kareth, nothing marked him as hers. You are free, she said. The council can return you to the human border within 2 days. No house will challenge your departure. No custom will follow you. Daniel looked down at his bare wrist. He had imagined freedom many times inside the fortress. He had expected relief, perhaps excitement. Instead, the absence of the bracelet felt strangely cold. And you? He asked. I will return to Kareth and face the houses. Alone? I have always done so. That was not an answer. Vaelara turned toward the stars. It is the only answer I know. Daniel stepped beside her. Then learn another. Her ears lifted slightly. You do not owe me anything. Good. I dislike debt. Daniel, I am not staying because of a duel, a chain, or an ancient law written by people who apparently needed 11 years to discuss their feelings. She faced him slowly. Then why? Daniel hesitated, suddenly wishing another ancient death machine would interrupt them. Fighting autonomous weapons had been simpler. Because when that station called attachment a weakness, it was wrong. Because you threw yourself in front of a plasma beam for me. Because you laugh at my jokes despite having terrible judgment. Your jokes are frequently poor. And yet you keep listening. Vaelara's golden eyes shone beneath the silver branches. Daniel held out his hand. I am staying because I choose to. She stared at his hand as though it were more dangerous than any weapon he had carried. Then she placed hers in it. The living ship produced a warm musical note around them. Daniel glanced at the wall. It approves. Vaelara's smile returned, quiet and unguarded. The ship is sentimental. It learned from you. That accusation may cause another duel. Excellent. I know how those end. She stepped closer. This time, human, I will not allow you near the gravity controls. Then I may have to use charm. You possess charm? The medical scans were inconclusive. Her laughter filled the garden while the courier turned toward the Varithi capital, carrying them toward a ceremony no longer required by law, but chosen by both. The Varithi capital had been built around a captive aurora. Rivers of charged light circled the towers, flowing through transparent bridges and gathering above the imperial palace in a vast, luminous crown. Daniel watched the city rise beneath the living courier and decided that humanity's first embassy would require a larger budget. "Your people do not believe in subtle architecture," he said. Vaelara stood beside him in restored ceremonial armor, its dark plates edged with silver. Her long blonde hair had been braided away from her elegant ears, and the ancient insignia of the 9th spear shone at her shoulder. The palace was designed to inspire reverence. It inspires concern about the electricity bill. The ship hummed with amusement. Vaelara touched the wall. "You have encouraged terrible behavior. I have improved morale." Millions gathered within the palace arena, while billions more watched through quantum-linked projections across both civilizations. Human diplomats occupied one side of the circular hall. Varithi warriors, nobles, engineers, and priests filled the other. Corveth stood near the front wearing ceremonial robes and carrying the loose reactor valve Daniel had repaired, now mounted inside a crystal box as though it were a sacred relic. Daniel stared at it. "You preserved the broken part?" Corveth bowed solemnly. "The instrument of percussive restoration. I should never have explained warranties to him." At the center of the arena stood 2 empty platforms connected by a bridge of light. Magistrate Othara addressed the gathered worlds, revealing the truth recovered from the ancient station. The marriage law had never granted ownership. It had been created to transform enemies into chosen allies before vengeance could become inheritance. Several noble houses lowered their banners in shame. Lord Sarath did not. Daniel noticed him near the western gallery, surrounded by officers whose mirrored armor displayed no family symbols. Vaelara noticed them a moment later. The lights failed. Explosions tore through the upper galleries. Shield generators collapsed as hidden devices activated beneath the arena. The captive aurora above the palace twisted downward, trapped inside a magnetic funnel aimed directly at the ceremonial platforms. Panic spread through the hall. Sarath stepped onto the bridge holding a command device. "This union ends now. The Dominion will not kneel beside a primitive species." Daniel drew the compact pulse weapon hidden beneath his formal coat. "I knew the ceremony was going too smoothly." Vaelara's blade unfolded into golden light. "You complained about the seating. The chairs were hostile." Sarath activated the device. Armored drones erupted from the walls, firing into the palace guards. Human soldiers and Varithi warriors moved together without waiting for orders. Corveth hurled his crystal display at a drone, shattering its sensor array. Daniel stared. "You threw the sacred valve." "It demanded sacrifice." Vaelara charged across the bridge. Daniel followed, covering her as she cut through the first line of attackers. Months earlier, he would have searched for the safest position and trusted no one beyond his own weapon. Now he moved within a living pattern of allies. He passed targeting data to Varithi soldiers, accepted ammunition from a noble guard, and trusted Vaelara to stand where his blind side ended. Sarath retreated toward the magnetic controls. "You will divide our people," he shouted. Vaelara struck aside his blade. Fear divided them long before he arrived. Daniel reached the console, but the aurora funnel had already destabilized. Within seconds, its charged particles would tear through the palace and ignite the city's power network. The controls required 2 biological command signatures, human and Varithi. Daniel smiled despite the alarms. Apparently, the universe enjoys symbolism. Vaelara seized Sarath's weapon arm and drove him to the floor. "Can you stop it?" "Probably." "That word has lost all comfort." Daniel placed his hand on one side of the console. Vaelara joined him on the other. The system recognized their combined signatures, just as the ancient station had. Light surged through their arms, projecting their memories into the air. The battlefield on Kareth, silver chains, the living ship, the dead star, and 2 hands choosing not to let go. Together they redirected the aurora upward. The palace roof opened as a column of white fire rose into the sky. It spread harmlessly above the city, becoming a radiant spiral visible across the entire planet. The remaining drones shut down. Serath stared at the united soldiers surrounding him. His conspiracy had depended upon two species refusing to trust each other. Instead, human medics treated wounded Varethi, alien engineers repaired human equipment, and Lord Serath's own guards lowered their weapons. Othara ordered his arrest. When silence finally returned, the bridge was damaged, the ceremonial banners were burning, and Daniel's formal coat had lost one sleeve. He looked at Vaelara. Do all Varethi weddings involve attempted coups? Only important ones. That is reassuring. I was afraid this was personal. Before the assembled worlds, Vaelara removed the last ceremonial chain from its velvet stand. She held it for a moment, then let it dissolve into silver light. No chain binds us, she said. No victory owns us. I stand beside this human because he had the strength to spare an enemy, the courage to trust one, and the poor judgment to remain after being offered freedom. Daniel stepped onto the bridge. I stayed because she taught me that caring for someone does not make a soldier weaker. It gives every battle a reason to end. Vaelara's confidence faltered for the first time that day. Her ears lowered slightly as she faced him. You belong to me now, she began softly. You are my... No, Daniel interrupted. The arena became completely still. He took her hands. We belong to each other. The captive aurora blazed above the open palace as the crowd rose. Human applause mixed with the Varethi thunder of armored fists striking breastplates. Even the living courier sang from the landing tower. Months later, the border on Kareth became the site of the first joint human Varethi academy. Corveth directed its engineering division and continued teaching percussive restoration, despite Daniel's objections. Othara rewrote the ancient bond law so no person could ever again confuse tradition with ownership. The disgraced noble houses funded the rebuilding of the palace, largely because Vaelara personally supervised their labor schedules. Daniel accepted a position as Earth's military liaison, though his official duties frequently included repairing alien machinery and explaining human expressions before medical drones became involved. On the evening their first exploration vessel departed beyond mapped space, he stood beside Vaelara on the command deck. Stars gathered ahead of them, untouched and endless. Any regrets? She asked. Daniel considered the ruined rifle, the chains, the political crises, the murderous station, and the wedding interrupted by an aurora weapon. 1. Her golden eyes narrowed. What? I still never got that scenic tour brochure. Vaelara laughed as the vessel entered fold space, carrying them toward worlds that had never seen a human, a Varethi, or a marriage that began with a duel and survived because both warriors finally chose peace.